Good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to watch the question and answer session about the upcoming fall semester with school administration. I would also like to extend a thank you to all of our participants for taking time out of their busy schedules. Let me start off by introducing myself. I'm Joey Abeda, current ASG president. Justin, would you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Justin Douse, the current ASG Vice President.
So at this little question and answer session, we have the people at the forefront of preparing for this upcoming fall semester. We have members from the F20 group, Dr. Rick Olson, Dr. Margaret Leary, Dr. Nina Din, members from the Health and Safety Committee, Dr. Melissa Halter, Return to Living Learning, Dr. Margaret Leary and Dr. Nina Din, and members that are helping to address international issues, Dr. Denise Damone, lead with study abroad and international scholars. And we also have Luke LaCroix from Residential Life. So thank you all for coming. If I missed anyone in the introductions, forgive me. And to our audience members watching this forum tonight, it will be split up into two parts.
So in order to honor everyone's time, we'll be hosting this session for about an hour and a half, and we plan to stick by it with the planned cutoff time being at about 8:30 p.m. Pacific time.
Thank you, Justin. And the first part will be composed of questions submitted by students prior to this event. These questions cover several topics, including tuition, hybrid classes, COVID-19 protocols, international students, and anti-racism. With the remaining time, the questions asked will be submitted live during the stream. Without any further delay, let's move to our first question. So our first question is pertaining to tuition. Will we have discounted tuition due to hybrid classes and or online classes? If classes go entirely online, will we have to pay full tuition?
Okay, good evening. I'm Carmen Vazquez, Vice President for Student Affairs, and thank you to the Associated Student Government Leadership for hosting this night's event and my colleagues who have joined us to respond to student questions and their concerns. At this time, the university is not considering a discount for tuition. The university continues to invest in financial aid for our students. In fact, increasing the undergraduate aid budget from $92 million in fiscal year 20 to $104 million in fiscal year 21. So we are currently investing in technology in the classrooms, and this is to ensure that the hybrid model delivers on our commitment to academic excellence. We have also been investing through the summer in the training and development of our faculty to deliver that high quality educational experience. And all in all, our focus and investments have been to deliver a high impact learning experience for our students, even if remote. It would be important, I think, to know that the negative financial impact of the pandemic on the university for just spring semester was in excess of $17 million. And now we are projecting that the impact on the academic year may exceed $40 million. So what that, and in addition to that, our endowment, because of the market and the economic issues, was decreased in value by over $50 million since the beginning of the current economic downturn. So we have no plans at all to pass these additional expenses on to our students, but rather to cut our budgets and engage in essential purchasing and spend while hoping that we will not have to cut our budget, that we will not have to cut jobs and health benefits for our employees. So we're looking at other options in other ways. So for example, I think it would be important to know that the president, the vice presidents, and the deans have voluntarily reduced their salaries, by 5 to 15%. All our employees are not going to be taking a salary increase this year, and that we have every employee will forego their salary increase this year, and that all employees will have their retirement contribution cut in half for this next foreseeable future. So as you can see, we're trying to take the necessary steps to lower costs with little impact on the student body as possible. And we are dedicating our fundraising efforts on acquiring more funding for both need-based and merit-based aid. And specifically, I think it would be important to know that in the spring, the university, unlike many other universities, did not offer refunds to their students in the spring, whereas USD did. And in other words, if you had a housing or a dining balance, that was refunded to you because we recognize the many financial difficulties that our families and our students were experiencing. But no, at this time, we are not considering a tuition rebate or refund.
Thank you very much, Carmen Vasquez, for the thorough response. Our second question also pertains to tuition, and it came directly from one of our Instagram polls. It is, in quote, why is USD's tuition increasing for 2020-2021 in spite of the financial burdens students face during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Okay, thank you. The tuition increase for the fall was a decision that was made and approved by the Board of Trustees, which is our consistent practice prior to the pandemic, and was communicated to our campus community at that time. It's important to know that tuition only covers approximately 75% of the cost associated with running our university. The rest comes through philanthropy, endowment spending, which I just referred to a few minutes about the drop in that, outside grants and auxiliary funding such as housing, campus rentals, and events. You may also know that this summer, this fall, and we're not sure if it'll go into the spring, we are not having any outside groups or organizations use our campus because we want to leave it for the core purpose of our students, our faculty, and our staff. And so that means that revenue is not an option for us right now. And just this summer, for example, for conferences and special events, that's about a $4 million amount that we're not able to generate. So unlike many universities, we gave no refunds to students. We gave refunds to students in the spring, and we did refund the remaining fees to all students. And the other excellent piece was that our associated student government allowed us to support our students who had unique and special needs at this time. So that was another effort that we were able to meet. So we thought that the best way to help our students and their families was to do that kind of a refund. But no, we that is why we do a tuition increase, because 75% of our costs are covered through tuition.
Thank you, Vice President Vazquez. This next question is pertaining to hybrid classes. And it is the plan to reopen the campus still in action for this upcoming semester?
Yes, and I think the folks that have joined me on the Zoom tonight can speak to that. But here's what I would like to say. We are planning alongside with the approval and support of our state and county public health officials and guidance and guidelines to be ready to welcome our newest toreros on August 13th. That's our plan. And we'll talk a moment about the hybrid model. Dr. Nina Din will be able to share more about that. What we also know that I think is really important is that the disease and human behavior dictates what we're able to do. And you have seen even here in San Diego that we are now one of the counties that has had to roll back some of our indoor activities. For example, restaurants and museums and theaters and the like. And that's because of the numbers and the data points that we're facing at this particular moment. So it is very much an evolving and rapidly developing situation for us. But our plan is to open in the hybrid model and begin classes on August 17th. Nina, could you please describe what the hybrid model will look like?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Carmen. So when we talk about hybrid classes, let's say that you have a class that's a Tuesday, Thursday. What that will mean is that you will be present in that classroom with the professor on the Tuesday, and half of the class, the other half of the class, along with, so 50% of the course students are going to be in the class along with you, and then the other 50% are going to be watching remotely, so that we reduce the actual number of students in that classroom so we can account for social distancing. So that's what we mean by hybrid classes. And so then if you're not in that class space on the Tuesday, then you are going to be watching remotely on the Thursday, and your colleagues who are watching remotely on the Tuesday will actually be in the class on that Thursday. So that's what we mean by hybrid classes. We've placed there's about 130 classrooms that have this new Panapto capturing system that will allow the faculty to, this capturing system will allow the faculty to be viewed from the back of the classroom. So it's like you're sitting in that classroom. All of the instructors are going to be accommodating students who need to be 100% remote. So we recognize that for whatever reasons, wellness concerns, family concerns, students have to be remote for the full 100% remote. And so we are accommodating those students too by having these capturing systems, but also making sure that the students who cannot be watching live, that they have the ability to watch the lecture at another point. Okay.
Thank you. I also just wanted to point out this afternoon, President Harris sent a communication, and it does refer to the opening of campus, the low density model, and also the health and safety. So please, I know students, you're not always opening your emails, but there is an email message from our president to you this afternoon.
Thank you, Vice President Vazquez and Dr. Nina Din for the clarification on hybrid classes. Another question that students are wondering is how may they be able to partake in this experience with their professors every day? For example, will students who decide to return to campus be able to see their professors every day? And how might that look like if modified?
I'd like to ask Dr. Olson to be able to answer that question. You're on mute.
I think I get a prize for being the first person to be on mute inadvertently. There are a couple of ways to answer that question, and part of it revolves around what you mean by whether I'll be able to see my professors. Just like some of the students aren't going to be able to be on campus, there's a segment of the faculty who aren't going to be able to be on campus to teach their classes day to day. So some of the classes that you end up taking will have a faculty member who will be remote at the time that they are teaching their class. So there will be that element. However, the faculty that are on campus teaching their hybrid classes should be available. There may be some people who don't come to campus every day, and you know, they stay home the days that they aren't teaching, but on those days that they are teaching, they should be accessible. Certainly on a day when your class, when you're part of the class that's meeting in the classroom, you'll see the instructor right in front of you. But even in the other cases, if you're at home watching remotely, the Panopto system is dynamic enough that it's going to feel much more like you're with the faculty member than last semester. So that if you're asking a question from home, the answer will be piped into the whole room and people will be able to hear the question. And so that aspect of the interaction is going to feel quite a bit different probably than last semester during the class periods. After class, you know, those of us that are going to be on campus will continue to have office hours. Now, it's not entirely clear person to person whether that office hour will be physically in their office or whether it will be a Zoom office meeting, but those sessions will continue to occur. I think that one of the things that faculty learned last semester was how they can use Zoom more effectively. So we've gotten a little bit better at that. And we've heard some reports from students that they thought the Zoom office hours were a little more flexible, a little more useful to them than having to trudge across campus. So I think some of the faculty have also embraced that as a way to give you more access to them. So I think that one of the things that'll happen is you'll have the same level of and quality of access to the faculty that you usually have. It might not be face-to-face across the desk because of safety concerns, but the overall experience should be what you expect.
Thank you, Dr. Olson and Vice President Vazquez. And before I move on to the next question, I would like to give a plug to our little live stream on YouTube. If you are viewing this on YouTube, we'd encourage you to ask questions that you may have in the chat option. We will try our best with the time that we have remaining at the end of this Zoom session to answer your questions submitted via YouTube. So with that, our next question pertains to COVID-19 protocols and is, what will USD's policy on mandatory COVID-19 testing and temperature taking look like? And when will these formal plans be released to the student body?
Thank you. I think that question could be best answered by Dr. Melissa Halter.
Sure, thank you very much. The university currently is recommending testing for all individuals who will be coming on campus. So, and we are recommending what's called RT-PCR testing, which is what's kind of the gold standard of testing. It allows for us to be able to see if somebody could be diagnosed with COVID, whether they're symptomatic, so they have a cough or they have the sniffles or they have back pain or they have some of the symptoms, or they're asymptomatic, which means you're not seeing any symptoms. And we want to have individuals do that test before they come. So if for some reason they actually do have COVID and they're asymptomatic, they're able to stay home or isolate and not come to campus and not further spread that. And it also, so it's helping our community in that way, but it's also helping inform how we can outreach and support those community members who have taken a test and found out that they do have COVID, but they're just not symptomatic, so that we can help set up the hybrid model. They might be more remote in that hybrid model, but they're able to directly connect with their faculty and our community in a way that they can still actively engage on campus.
Thank you, Dr. Halter. Another concern that students have right now is that they are wondering if the state or county approved USD's 6-point plan yet.
So
I'm sure I will answer that. And I realized that I forgot to answer another portion of the first question that you all asked me about temperature checks. So I can go back to that one as well. So let's start with the temperature checks piece. One of the pieces that the county has asked us to do if we're given clearance to reopen is to go through a screening process. Everyone who comes on campus will go through a screening process, and that screening process will require no contact temperature check, in addition to some questions that will be asked of all people who come on campus. So you can expect that. We're going to have stations where that can happen multiple places across campus so that it can be as efficient as possible. We do know that the temperature check process, we've been piloting it, can take about 7 to 10 seconds at the very most for you to go through the process and for you to get all of those questions answered. So it should be fairly rapid, and we are working to have those stations across campus to make it as accessible as possible for the whole community. So the next question that was asked of me is really thinking about, has the state or county approved our 6-point plan? So the state does not approve campus plans for reopening. They provide us with orders and guidance. And so those orders were required to make sure that we can do all of the things that are orders. And then the guidance, our 6-point plan aligns very closely with all of the guidance. And so we are prioritizing health and safety. We are prioritizing monitoring the virus. We are prioritizing ensuring testing is available and accessible to our community. We are ensuring that we are managing social distancing, proper prevention strategies, et cetera. All of those align directly with the guidance that is provided by the state and the county.
I'd like to just add that generally the independent colleges and universities do not provide the state with documents like our plan for review and approval. And even the Cal State system, they would not necessarily share it with the state, but they would share it with their systems office. And the same with the University of California, San Diego, and all the UCs, they would share it with their central president's office. So it's not that the state, as Dr. Halter said, would approve campus plans. They provide guidance and recommendations and orders. and then we comply and work within those parameters.
Fantastic. Thank you for your responses. The next question is, will research labs be kept open for students in the case that USD goes fully online?
Dr. Olson or Dr. Din, who would like to answer that?
Start. So really it will depend on what the county indicates in terms of being able to have individuals on campus and how many we can have in terms of group sizes. We currently are able to have research happening in the science and tech building. We have very careful monitoring of people going into and out of the building. We have students working in the labs under social distancing rules and regulations. So it really does depend again on if we go fully online. It would depend on whether the county will allow us to have such activities going on. I know that we actually had a conversation before we came online just now, is that in the spring we were not allowed to carry out the research activities when we pivoted. But again, for the fall, we would have to go with the guidelines that are given to us.
I don't have anything else to add. I think that's the complete answer.
In that case, we can move on to the next question. Thank you everyone for your contributions. The next COVID-19 protocol question has to do with the common spaces around campus. How will common spaces such as Frank's Lounge or the UCs operate while practicing social distancing?
That
Dr.
will
Holton,
depend.
do you want to answer that?
Oh,
Yes, go ahead.
that will again also depend on county guidance. But we do plan to operate in a model where students can engage in the campus and the campus community with the 6-foot distancing model. And so we have created plans to determine how many individuals could be in different common spaces at a time. And we're going to very much leverage our outdoor community as well. Just as the county is as strongly encouraging us to use outdoors as much as possible, we, for the whole county, USD is taking that up too, and we have a great campus for that. So you will be seeing more activities outside when possible.
Okay. So the next question also pertains to COVID-19 protocols and is, will we be wearing masks at all times on campus or just in classrooms? And what are the consequences of not wearing a mask in public?
This is Melissa again from Student Wellness, and I will take that one again. Yes, we again will be following the guidance of the county, and currently the orders are that when you are outside of your private residence, you will be needing to wear a facial covering. And so we will be doing this the same. So if you are in your private residence in a residence hall, you can take off your facial covering. But if you are in the community space, anything that's a community space, we will be asking you to wear a facial covering. We will have spaces where you will be able to eat and hydrate appropriately, because we do know that our commuter students are going to need spaces like that and in between classes. So there'll be proper signage and appropriate direction as to where you can do that, just as the county is allowing people to do that right now in different places. Like if you were to go to a park, you could have a picnic, etc. So we will make sure that those who do not actually live on campus do have spaces to engage in activities such as eating and drinking, so that they can stay engaged in the classroom experience as well, or if they're studying in the library.
And Dr. Halter, the second part to that question, what would be the consequences of students not wearing their facial coverings?
Sure, thank you. I think that the student leadership has taken a huge leap in supporting this already by creating your pledge. And so we really are very much hoping that we can see this as community responsibility. And we have a responsibility to each other. It ties very much to our values of an institution is that we take care of each other, and you are not only taking care of yourself, but you're taking care of one another. So please, when you think about the pledge and what you all have agreed to do and you're asking other students to do, that means you will wear your facial covering, and we will compassionately and appropriately hold each other accountable for doing that for one another. So sometimes we may be forgetting. This is a new habit that we're all trying to learn. So it may just be that I didn't pick it up at my desk, and can someone say to me, Melissa, don't forget, can you grab your, facial covering because we're about to go out? That would be a great way of intervention that we all can do. While at the same time, we do have our student code of conduct that we could use if necessary, but we strongly believe that with community buy-in and community support and the leadership of the students, we probably won't have much of a problem. So.
Thank you for the response. As we pivot towards the realm of international relations, we have some students that are curious as to how study abroad options will look for the upcoming school year. I.e., will study abroad options still be available, or are they all completely suspended or shut down?
Hi, I'm Dr. Denise Diamond, Associate Provost for International Affairs, and I'm very happy to answer that question. For the fall, most of the study abroad options were canceled. The only real exception is for some international students that were wanting to stay closer to home. So we have a few students that are studying abroad in China, and they're Chinese. We have a student that's in Ireland studying with a partner in Ireland. So those are really the only ones. They didn't need visas. So for fall, study abroad is canceled. So I'm not sure what people are asking. I hope they're asking about the future, because definitely as soon as we're able, we will ramp up and maybe even offer more options than we have in the past, because we know many of our students want to have this experience. And if we are able to have some study abroad in the spring, it's going to be different, just like it's going to be a little different on campus. All of our partners are doing very much the same things that we are with social distancing and doing hybrid courses, spreading things out. So it might be possible to go in the spring. I don't know yet. We're just going to see how it's going to work. But I actually am optimistic that we will be able to have some study abroad in the spring. And certainly after a vaccine, after some normal comes again, we will have full options for all of our students.
Fantastic. So the next question also pertains to an international aspect. ICE earlier this week announced a new policy. What plans does the administration have to protect international students if during the fall a full transition to remote learning best protects the safety of our USD community?
Well, for those people that might not be familiar with the announcement that came out from ICE, normally when students are here on an international student visa, they are not allowed to study remotely. And that's because, of course, they're here to be students and they shouldn't be in a 100% remote program. But this was changed last spring because all of the universities switched to remote. And so they allowed students to continue to go remote. They allowed for summer, and they just changed it this week. They made an announcement that students, international students, if they're going 100%, if they're here in the US, doing 100% remote, they're not allowed to do that. That would be in violation of their visa. And they even said specifically that if a university goes remote, then their visa would not be allowed to continue. Now, there's going to be some, first I want to tell you that so many faculty wrote to me and said, what can we do? What kind of course can we offer to make sure that our students wouldn't have to leave if something like this happened, or that our students can stay even if they were planning for health and safety reasons that are here in the US to do many of their courses remote. How can we design something? And we're coming up with ideas that will not be in violation of any of the requirements of the law, that will give these options for our students. And I can say that the guidelines aren't firm yet. And this happens so many times that the government, so many times recently, that the government comes out, they make a statement, and then 3 or 4 days later, they come out with the more strict guidelines because people ask, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? And so we're optimistic it's not going to be quite so harsh, because right now students can be here if they're just taking really one course kind of in a hybrid model, and even all of the rest remotely, they will not be in violation. And we're hoping that that's going to continue. I don't know exactly what will happen if we had to go 100% remote, but I'm optimistic that what this initial announcement was made will not be what is going to be the final version. There's lawsuits, universities objecting. I don't think it's going to stay. It's just enough to cause much more uncertainty and angst of everyone that's already feeling so much uncertainty.
And I would just add that the University of San Diego has joined Harvard and MIT and the amicus to protest this action.
Yes.
Thank you, Vice President Vazquez and Dr. Dimon, for shedding light on the complexity of this situation. As I'm sure you all are aware, several schools at USD have a significant international student population, including the School of Engineering. That being said, certain students are curious, just bluntly, what is the possibility in which classes would switch mid-semester to an online mode? And if/when this switch does occur, would these international students be expected to depart the country?
I think part of that was answered if, the government said we had to go to online. I'm optimistic that they wouldn't have to leave. There could be some times, and maybe Dr. Olson, you might, or Dr. Dan, you might want to help me on this, but there could be some times that a course would go to remote. I mean, maybe a faculty member became ill and switch for a time being to remote. But the idea, though, is they're going to be classified in the class that's a hybrid class. Even if the class were temporarily remote, it's going to be considered a hybrid class.
Right. I think that if an individual course, if the instructor becomes sick, then what would probably happen is the department would step in and find somebody else to pick up that class for the next, 2 or 4 weeks. So that shouldn't affect that piece at all. If the entire campus goes to remote because there's the outbreak again or something, well, then it's really hard to predict what the probability of that happening might be. One of the things that we did do when we sort of designed the revised semester was move things so that we started earlier and we end earlier, so that we're going to be finishing before Thanksgiving, and that was intentional to try to avoid some people are saying that if there's a second wave, it would probably be November, December, January period. And there are a couple of dates that we have is sort of what we're calling pivot dates, one in late September and one in mid-October, mid-late October, I think, where if the administration is looking ahead and they see that we might need to leave campus, then we might be able to do something similar to what we did last semester. But there'll be some warning there. And I think that what Dr. Diamond said is completely right. So far, everybody's been pretty rational about recognizing the special circumstances. And if the university starts things in a certain mode in good faith, and then the governor says you're not allowed to do this anymore, I'm pretty confident that cooler heads will prevail and that we'll figure out the best course of action from there.
Thank you, Dr. Olson. Just to go back to that question, if students could receive, let's say, a number percentage base on just the likelihood of the entire school going online, if you could, just to entertain the idea, what would that possibility
That's a
be?
crystal ball question.
50% plus or minus 48%. It really is just too hard to try to predict, because you're trying to anticipate where the rises might be, and how effective people will be at controlling things, I'd say that if you don't want that to happen, wear your mask.
Yeah.
Do all the things that people are telling you to do to try to stop the spread, and then it's less likely to happen.
Thank you very much for your response. I remember your operations research class, so I'll take it with me.
May I interject for a second to Dr. Olson's comment about wearing masks? My name is Dr. Luke LaCroix, and I work in residential life. That also means following county directions on and off campus. So important as a community that we are a community in San Diego, in the county, in the city, on campus, because the germs travel. They don't stop at the gate. And I just think that's so important as we are doing this as a team. We're toreros together. I really appreciate Dr. Olson's comment about following PPE and Dr. Halter's directions.
Yeah, if you want the class to take place, don't make me sick, right? I mean, if you're out socializing, you're coming to campus, the average faculty member isn't 22 years old. And so that's something that you can help us.
Well, and the reality right now in our county, we're seeing 20 to 30-year-olds as the spiking number.
Thank you for your response to that question. The next question is, for students who are currently outside the United States, but were planning to attend the fall semester in person, what are their options, and will they be able to enter the US or not?
Well, I'll try that one too. My questions seem to require more of a crystal ball to answer. This is a really serious problem because there are some countries where currently we have a travel ban allowing them to enter because of COVID-19. And some of those countries, actually, we should change that because they're doing a lot better than we are. So they're waiting to get in. I know of some students that are going through third countries to make their way here. So it's not something I'm recommending, but some of the students, it's going to be difficult for them to get here on campus if we have a travel ban. Additional problems that some of our international students have had are getting new students getting their visas. But for our continuing international students, if you're in a country now, and we're estimating that 50% of our international students are not here in the US right now. And so most of the European countries we have the travel ban with. We also have with China and some other countries that we're just hoping that by August 1, that things will change and we will release that ban. But that is a State Department ruling. And so it's a very difficult situation. Of course, our international students can attend our classes remotely. So.
Thank you very much for that clear response. As we shift into our final question for the time being with the International Center, we have this question. How many in-person classes will these international students be required to take in order to be legally allowed to reside in the United States? And will they be able to choose if they can take the class online or in person?
Well, right now, the initial guidance, without all of the details that they just announced this week on Monday, it looks like it's just going to be one class that would need to be classified as in-person or hybrid that the students would need to take. And we have, I believe maybe it'll be addressed by someone else that pretty soon students will know which those classes are. But we did identify about 150 students, international students on F1 visas that are in all remote courses. Now, some of those, that might be their choice. And so we're contacting all of our international students to make sure that they understand, and we work with them to make sure if they want to be here on campus, want to be in the US, that we are working with them to meet the new guidelines and regulations. So we're reaching out to everyone, and we'll help make that happen. And as like I said, faculty are writing saying, I'll teach a class, I'll do something, what can I do? So.
As a follow-up to that question with the one class requirement, is there a minimum credit or unit requirement for this one course? For example, USD has half a credit courses, there's 3 unit courses. What might that look like?
Right now, that's not really specified. So there could be some
Thank
opportunities
you.
for research, experiential learning, these kinds of activities.
Thank you for that. Now we're moving into the realm of anti-racism. Our first question is, what are we going to do to protect our marginalized students this year?
I'll begin that question. I'd like to take this opportunity because it is an opportunity to share with you, what we've learned and what we're doing, not only for our marginalized students, but in general for our diversity and inclusion expansion efforts, because it's part of our goal too of envisioning 2024, as you know, which is to strengthen diversity, inclusion, and social justice on our campus. So I want to admit and acknowledge that as a university, we have considerable work to do to become the diverse and inclusive campus to which we aspire. But it's also important to review some of the activities that are currently underway. So it's in that spirit that I share some of this with you this evening. From these experiences and initiatives, we can learn what has been effective, we can identify additional growth opportunities, and we can lay a foundation for achieving our goal. So I'm going to start with academic, but then I'll talk about student affairs. I'll ask Dr. Leary to talk about some of the work we're doing in hiring a consultant to work with our staff, and I'll ask Dr. Halter to talk about the 3 surveys that surveys that students are expected to take in terms of alcohol and other drugs, sexual assault education, violence and education prevention, and now the newest one, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But let me start with our postdoc program. In about the year 2014, so now that's about 6 years ago, there were 17 new scholars that have come to the College of Arts and Science, and Dr. Nina Din can also speak to this, to work for 2 years as faculty members. The good news, as I said, what we learned is that 5 have remained at USD and are now on the tenure track position. So this was a great opportunity to provide academic experience for diverse scholars and to provide diverse faculty for our students. So that's one of the ways that we also support our Black student experience. This program is now going to be expanded to other schools on our campus. So that's very exciting. I'd like to share this data point because this is important. Because data indicated that our Black students did not persist at the same rate as other students, a number of programs and support services were implemented. Many of you are familiar with our Black Student Resource Center as one of those major initiatives. That wasn't the only, there were others. But in 2018, 42% of our incoming first-year students were underrepresented. In 2019, 1 year later, 42% of our incoming students were from underrepresented groups. In the same comparative, in 2018, 85% of our Black student retention, which means our first year to second year, our Black student retention number was 85%. In 2019, it increased to 89%. So the initiatives that we implemented are making a difference. Now we want to see that as a trend and a trend upward, but that's a measurement of how we know we are doing. The Humanities Center, dedicated to the exploration of our human condition and limitless ways in which human beings understand and interact in our world, brings lectures and scholars and semester series and pop-up courses, and they've encouraged the exploration of the diversity of the human experience and the experience in particular of our Black community. So that's another academic effort. One that I think is most exciting. I don't know if many of the students on the YouTube tonight may have remembered Jericho Brown. He was one of our faculty members in English, and he's at Emory right now, and he's formerly a USD faculty member, and he's coming in as a Dorothy Cooper Creative Writing Center, and will host the Pulitzer winning prize poet Jericho Brown this fall as an all-Black writers, poets, and essayists. So that's very exciting. And that's another way that we support our students, by having the representation, the education, and the opportunity to engage with these renowned faculty. This summer, Black Lives Matter conversations took place. Corey Gooding from Poli Sci and Shannon Miller from History in July, week 1, did a piece on Black Lives Matter conversations. And in July, the second week of the summer session, Defunding the Police, an explanation, with Sid Martinez in sociology. And the neighborhood has its own rules, Latinos and African Americans in South Los Angeles. So we're bringing critical topics and conversations into the dialogue of our campus, so that our students from all perspectives can really learn and grow in this area. You know that we have a presidential task force on immigration and DACA, and that was formed in 2016. For the past 3 years, our academic affairs area at USD has been led by Provost Gail Baker. She is an African-American educator and administrator whose own scholarship has been focused on the Black experience in America. Student Affairs is adding the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion module to the new student orientation curriculum. In fact, we've expanded it. It's not only the new student orientation, all undergraduate students will be required to take this, this module. And to know more about that, Dr. Halter or Dr. Leary can share more about that. We are in the process at USD of hiring its first full-time dedicated Chief Diversity Officer in the next few weeks. While our efforts have been strong in the past, we saw a need to bring focus and attention to diversity and inclusion in our campus, so that is on the horizon. I'm very excited about this. The College of Arts and Science is developing an interdisciplinary pop-up course on racism and inequality for the fall semester. What's exciting to me about this is faculty from across the campus will be invited to participate. It'll be open to all undergraduate students and will bring the subject of racism into the curriculum and highlights research. We have an incoming, well, actually, she's already started, the interim dean of SOLS, Dr. Joy Spencer. She's been recognized on her work in STEM that is designed to bring students of color into the field, working with Perla Myers and Odesma Damarpal. The scholars sponsor camps on campus to make STEM both challenging and fun for young practicing or aspiring scholars, I should say. This, I think, is really important, that the students will want to know, what about the faculty? What's happening with the faculty? So we have a center, it's called the Center for Educational Excellence, and it's working on the development of materials that'll demonstrate the size and scope of racial inequities in education. It'll offer insights into the lived experience of students of color at college, particularly and at predominantly white institutions such as USD, illustrating the emotional, social, and academic burdens that are common parts of navigating campus life. And Dr. Halter can also talk with you about the trauma-informed work that we're doing with our students and with our staff to complement that. And the other aspect that I think is important with this, with the CEE and the future Center for Inclusion and Diversity officer, will be bringing outside experts to run training for faculty focused on racial unconscious bias and macro and microaggressions. The intention is to improve the way that faculty evaluate each other's teaching for promotion and tenure and hiring decisions, as well as improve the way faculty support our students of color. So these are some of the efforts that are either past practices, current practices, or will be in place in the fall. And then bringing outside experts also to offer syllabus workshops on evaluating and improving our syllabi to better represent scholars of color, to include ideas and theories that offer counter-narratives to dominant discourses. So these are some of the efforts that are happening from the academic perspective. And then I'll ask Dr. Leary to share with you what the work is that we're doing with our staff and student affairs around training for deep dialogues around race circles. And finally, the officer, the associate provost will be the new title of the head diversity position, and will also be part of the president's strategic leadership team. What I really liked about this question that you just asked me, though, is what are we doing? And I want to go to the word we. And the reason I want to focus on that right now is because we're talking to students and with students this evening. And I was one of the most first memorable presidents that I encountered in my youth was John F. Kennedy, and he often said, "Don't ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And when you use the word, "What can we do?" or "What will we do to support our community?" it's not uncommon for the stories that I hear from students that they feel that some of the microaggression and some of the bias and some of the race issues and experiences they have are either from their peers or in their classroom. And so I also ask you, what will you do to make this community more diverse, more inclusive, more welcoming, and become an anti-racist environment that we can all thrive in? So I think that I'll stop there, but I'd like Dr. Halter and Dr. Leary to just expand on those two initiatives.
Dr. Leary, do you want to speak first?
Go ahead, Melissa.
Sure. The initiatives that I believe that I should be speaking about are really thinking about the DEI initiative that we have for all students now. Carmen spoke about that we currently, or in the past, had a program tied to alcohol and other drug education and sexual violence. Those are education elements that are mandated from the federal government. And we at USD have always engaged in diversity education and thought about how do we do that in the best way possible. Knowing that we are moving to a hybrid model, some of the pieces where the education was happening needed to shift anyway. So it was a great opportunity for us to say, not only are we going to take these two pieces that are required by law, but we are going to move above and beyond that and say that in order to create the environment that we want on campus, focused on inclusion, we are going to require all of our students to take a module related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so that is a required piece now for all students who will be on campus. And it's not only educating our students, but it's also thinking about then how do we create our environments to become as anti-racist as possible and as trauma-informed as possible. So I have been given the opportunity to really take up some of the education around trauma and considering how many of our students have been impacted by trauma from birth to date, and that we need to be thinking about this ongoing trauma that many of our students are experiencing, and how do we infuse trauma-informed care and trauma-informed support in everything that we do to create environments that are going to better support all students, specifically our students from minority groups and who identify as a BIPOC individual. So those are the two pieces that I was going to speak about. And then Dr. Leary will speak about the other pieces about educating our staff more specifically.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Margaret Leary, and part of my role is working with the resident assistants, scholastic assistants, and transfer scholastic assistants. So when I talk about student leaders, that's the group that I'm referring to. And as Dr. Halter mentioned, that DEI module, all the student leaders will be taking that, as well as our graduate students. We have about 24 graduate students who are in the higher ed leadership program in Souls, and they work in our division and advise a lot of students. They will be taking that as part of their training as well. Additionally, when the new students take that DEI module, they will be engaged in a discussion facilitated by a professional staff member as well as a student leader to discuss and unpack what that means. So not only will they engage in this virtually, but then they'll be able to have a dialogue about that in a small group setting before they even arrive to campus. So we're sort of giving them that information, but then letting them unpack that before they arrive as well. In addition to that module, our student leaders engage in a good proportion of their time in training focused on our identities and communities learning outcomes. So they can both apply that to their own personal development as well as to their role as student leaders. And as Carmen mentioned, that the consultant that we're working with is helping us prepare our professional staff members for those small group conversations with new students, as well as to help us facilitate race circles is the way that we're phrasing this. And this is a place where folks can come together in a safe space with folks of the same race to be able to talk about how race impacts their experience from their own identity. So it creates a space where particularly white folks can come together and be able to talk about and learn more so that they can maybe minimize the impact that they have on our marginalized students or our Black students on our campus. And so this is, she's going to help our staff be able to facilitate those dialogues. And our intention originally was to work with those and have those happen with our student leaders. And our hope now is that we will be able to invest in those staff to be able to broaden that out to more folks on campus. With our virtual climate, we have to understand how that affects us, but I think microaggressions can happen virtually as well. And so we have to understand how we can have these conversations and create spaces for us to engage in these dialogues. So those are some of the pieces, and those trainings are taking place next week with our professional staff to prepare us for what's to come over the next several weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for shedding light on all these important issues. I'd like to take a quick moment now to address all of our participants in the live chat. At this moment, we are about to conclude with our pre-submitted questions that were turned in by students through our Instagram polls. So after we finish the next question, then we'll be turning over to answer the live chat submitted questions. So without further ado, I now hand it over to Joey as we approach residential life.
Thank you, Justin. So this next question about residential life is, the USD Vista reported that residence halls and apartments would only allow single occupancy this semester. Can you go into further detail on the occupancy of on-campus housing, including Pacific Ridge and the Palisades?
Do you want me to start, Luke or Melissa? I'll begin. So in order to de-densify the campus, to have the low density that was referred to in the president's communication to students and parents in our community today, and to be in accordance with the low risk that the CDC describes for higher education institutions, they say single room occupancy is the preferred modality for the low risk. And of course, it also meets our 6-point plan for the low density. So it has been decided that that is the model we need to employ in order to provide the most safe, healthy environment for our resident students for the fall and the spring. Melissa, do you want to add anything to that before Luke picks up on it?
I think you hit the key pieces. The real focus is health and safety and what has been recommended by the CDC.
What I can tell you in terms of the detail, in terms of what does this mean? It means that we will have approximately, and I'm giving you approximate numbers, about 1,200 resident students on USD campus. It also means that we have facilitated a relationship with American Assets, who own both Pacific Ridge and Lomas Palisades, to be able to accommodate our students. So right now, the inquiry in the president's communication will be that parents and families and students need to think about, do they want to stay home this semester because we're releasing the obligation for the first and second year residency requirement just for this year? Because some families feel like they would like that to be the case. Others don't, we want students to make their choice and to let us know by July 17th, and there'll be a communication that goes out from Residential Life in the next day about that. And it's our hope to hear back from students, and then we will work with first and second year placements. Those will be the priorities. And then what I mean is first year and sophomore year students. And then we'll see, depending on what inventory we have available, if we can go beyond that to meet any upper division requests. We are also exploring one other property, but I don't have the answer on that other property yet. It's a new property in the area of the campus. And Dr. Luke LaCroix, would you like to add to that?
Thank you, Vice President Vazquez and Dr. Halter. Great work. The questions that I see in the queue indicate what would a single occupancy on campus look like? And that would mean in our current model, which could change because this pandemic is day to day, is that there'd be one student per bedroom.
Correct.
So if you envision the vistas, there'd be one student in each bedroom. If you envision Valley B, it'd be one student per bedroom. But that could change with our work with the county and what is recommended by the CDC and what's really just safe for students to be able to sleep and study and be productive on campus. I know that the residential education team is working hard to create a model of where our live-in staff, our community directors, and our resident assistants will be building community on campus if we have students living in the residence hall. And that will be intentional and reflects our mission and our ability to students feel welcomed and that they belong. Across the street or down the road, the occupancy for Loma Palisades and Pacific Ridge at this point would be 2 students per room. Their spaces are bigger. Their spaces allow for the physical distancing for students to be 6 feet apart while sleeping, while studying. They also allow for a different conduit as it relates to what is considered higher education, congregate housing versus not. And I say that like in the way that we worked with students in the spring when we were transitioning to remote learning, is that some families or people might live in Pacific Ridge for 10 years and they may be 6 years old. The county didn't go in and say, you need to move because of this pandemic. Similarly, we're able to house 2 students per room in those facilities, 4 people per apartment, in a way that is also safe, but also informed by the CDC's expectations for apartment living. And the difference, though, for the students who opt into living in those facilities through USD is that they'll have some support with Residential Life for mediating like roommate conversations, or I have a question about this or that, etc. And we're prepared for that. Dean Godwin, myself, and Community Director Carrington Lemon are going to be the point people for helping our USC students leasing through the university at Pacific Ridge and Loma Palisades. And we just want to help all those students feel that they're connected. And I would also say that we're working closely with students who need housing through the questionnaire that Vice President Vazquez just messaged in regard to communications that will be going tomorrow. And we'll be really funneling this down as it gets more granular up to the 17th. So housing at San Diego is the point place for questions. And we have a team of volunteers that are going to be helping us manage that so that families and students can get responses in a timely manner.
Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Dr. LaCroix. In an effort to sort of condense certain answers while we're still on the realm of residential life, within the Q&A, certain questions more specific towards upperclassmen were asked, including, will juniors and seniors be guaranteed housing now that they were kicked out of Manchester Village per se? So upperclassmen are wondering how their housing will look like if they choose to remain on campus.
We've reached out to those students more than a week ago to request their interest in living in Pacific Ridge and Loma Palisades, noting that the majority of those spaces are shared rooms. So we're working with those students on a case-by-case basis. And students are able to opt into the shared spaces. They're also able to say that actually this isn't for me, and then they'd be able to cancel their contract with no fee. So we're still working with those students who were originally contracted to live in Manchester Village on an iterative basis and working with them and their families with all their questions. But noting, like, all of us have our own story and our own journey to USD. Everyone's situation is a little bit different. So I think that that's part of our culture and our DNA as an institution is to work with the person individually and the integrity of their situation, noting that like it's hard to meet one size does not fit all, and we recognize that, and some students may need to choose to learn remotely if that's what they think is best for themselves.
Thank you. And our next question is, when will USD be officially approved or disapproved for reopening by the county?
I'm happy to take that question. Basically, right now, the county has indicated that the only activities that we can have on campus for students are tied to research activities. And we believe that sometime towards the end of July, we will get additional guidance from the county and state. The county has indicated right now, as of August 1st, we should anticipate something, but that will vary depending upon how things change in the county and how the virus impacts our county. So much of our decision making is going to all of our decision making is going to be tied by county orders and then guidance, and those orders and that guidance is tied to how the virus behaves and impact on the San Diego community.
Thank you, Dr. Halter. At this time, we're curious as to how USD dining options will look like under the new social distancing guidelines.
I'm happy to take that one unless someone else wants to take that. I've been very impressed by the conversations that I've had with auxiliary services and dining. They are working diligently to ensure that there are still options available to our students in a way that you will have a sense of variety. We will be moving away from any form of buffet style activities. So for example, like a salad bar, you will not see something like a salad bar in the SLP. It will be individual plate service or box service, depending upon how you are engaging and what the county is telling us. but we will be doing as much preparation as possible on campus and providing as much variety as possible, but you shouldn't anticipate that they will be individually served items versus some form of buffet style. So when you think about if you've been in the SLP before and you were able to say maybe you wanted a slice of pizza and a salad, you might go grab a slice of pizza at dinner, and you would hold that instrument that would get the slice of pizza, and then you would go over and you get a plate and you would put your salad together. That is going to look different. You're still going to be able to get your slice of pizza. It will still be cooked on campus and put in a box and given to you, and you'll be given the opportunity to tell, I'd like vegetable pizza, or I'd like gluten-free pizza, or I'd like a piece of pepperoni pizza. So you'll still have your variety. You just won't be selecting it yourself. You'll be verbalizing what you want, and then they will be giving it to you. And then we will still have, for example, salad bar options or soup options, but someone else who is trained in food service and has the proper gloves and PPE specifically to support your well-being and the well-being of our community, they will be serving it to you. So you can expect more service of individual items versus any form of buffet style that you've experienced in the past.
Thank you for that response. The next question is, will the cost of room and board on campus change due to the new decision of one person per room?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yes. Will the cost of room and board on campus change due to the new decision of one person per room?
No, all of our resident hall assignments will be based on double occupancy.
Thank you, Vice President Vazquez. In reference to our YouTube chat, there is a high demand for students who are inquiring, when will we be able to see if our fall classes are either online or hybrid? So when will they receive that announcement for this?
Dr. Jin or Dr. Leary, do you want to talk about that?
I can start with the conversation, and Dr. Olson can also help. So we've collected all of the information from the faculty who need to be remote themselves. And we're also, so we have that data. We're just now trying to load that into the system. And we're hoping that in the next week or so that we can actually have, so when you look up your schedule, you will see right next to the section whether a course is being taught in the remote mode, which will just indicate R for remote, or whether it's in the hybrid mode. And so, like I said, we have the data, it's being loaded into Banner. We're just basically trying to figure out then how to, because as you can also imagine, we have to, because of the hybrid model, we have to split classes. So for example, a 30 cap class or 35 enrollment cap class needs to be split into groups. And so we also have to do that splitting of the groups to also make that very clear as to when students are going to be actually in class or if they're going to be watching the class remotely. So like I said, we're hoping in the next week or so to have that information up and available for students. And alongside that will be a communication sent to the students to help them read through how to decipher what that schedule looks like. Dr. Olson?
Right, that's the gist of it. Right before we met tonight, I looked up the dates that we had because I knew someone was going to ask that. And we had said the IT people and the scheduling people are sort of updating some of the numbers now, and we had set a target of July 17th for that task to be completed. My suspicion is that once that's completed, people will want to hit it with a hammer for a few days to see whether it broke and make sure everything's right before we sort of release things. One piece of information that Dean didn't mention is that the way the classes are going to be set up, there will be subgroups, so my operations research class might have 3 different groups of students in it, but there will be mechanisms for you to maybe switch from one section to another, from one of those subgroups to a different one. So if you want to be in the same group as your roommate or something like that. And so there are lots of new things that the IT people had to put into the schedule to make that work. We're also moving classrooms from one place to another to try to use the space as efficiently as possible and make sure that the students can see the faculty members as often as they can. So that's, it's almost like recreating a whole new schedule again. And so that's part of what's taking the time.
For the students on the event this evening, I want you to get really excited and know that our library is complete, and those that have seen it have really been impressed by the transformation. And the Learning Commons will also be open. So earlier we talked about common area and common spaces, and I was remiss to mention it then. So I just wanted to bring it up now. So you have something to look forward to.
Thank you very much, Vice President Vazquez, Dr. Olson, and Dr. Din. Our next question as pertains to individual students is, if a student starts in the hybrid model, but later in the semester due to unfortunate circumstances, will they be able to switch to the fully remote system at any time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, they can. So we've designed the classroom experience so that the student can either be sitting in the class or they can be remote. And so if a student, for wellness concerns or whatever reason, they have to switch modes from hybrid to remote, that is definitely possible. That's obviously something that we have factored into the design of that classroom experience for the students. That we might have some students, for example, if students are able to, some of our international students, if they're able to come onto campus, some of them may be experiencing delays because they have visa concerns, for example. And so some of them have indicated they may have to start remote and then switch to the hybrid mode. And again, we can accommodate that because of the way that we've set up that classroom experience.
And we're going one step further than that in some ways. We've told the faculty to try to be as flexible as they can with students. Certainly the Kuwaiti or Chinese student is going to have some time issues, but we also know that there are students who might be living locally that have personal family issues that might make it so that they can attend my class during the normal time, but can't attend Dr. Din's class during her time period. So you might be able to attend one class remotely and another live.
That's tremendous flexibility.
Right.
Thank you. The next question is in the same light. If the university starts the semester 100% remote, is there a chance we pivot back to hybrid mid-semester, or will it remain 100% remote even if health orders are lifted?
This is, I haven't heard anybody discuss this specifically, but I think that if we start it off remote, it's pretty unlikely that we'd switch to hybrid. It's easier to go from a hybrid mode to a remote mode because the university can just stop what they're doing on campus. But to switch into the hybrid mode, during the second week of October or something like that, becomes really difficult because you have to sort of ramp up and start all the processes, and that takes a couple of weeks in advance. And for the new incoming first year students, it would be difficult for them to start remotely and then show up the second week of October and not know anything about the campus and not have any orientation. So that would be pretty challenging. There's also been some talk about, could we go back and forth, start in hybrid and then have to go remote and then come back to hybrid. I don't think that would be a very likely event either, because if nothing else, that means students have to travel back and forth 2 more times, right? And so it's easy to start out in a hybrid mode and then switch to remote. Maybe you have to go home and then you're home for the rest of the semester, and you were going to go home in December anyway. But if you had something where you started here, went back home, came back here, went back home again in November, that's just a lot of moving back and forth. That's really disruptive. And so I think that that's probably very unlikely.
Thank you, Dr. Olson. In the event of USD switching to remote classes, will students be able to take the fall semester off or defer the semester and be guaranteed re-acceptance?
I can take that. I mean, so if we're talking about incoming students, so our incoming cohort, Some students have already indicated that they would like to defer for the spring semester or defer for a year. And so that is something that admissions is working with those students, and also then helping the students to, if they, because there's some certain number of classes that a incoming first year student can take each semester, and working with them to ensure that those courses that they do take can transfer back. So providing that support while they are deferring. For a continuing student, students, if they choose to do so, could take a leave of absence. So you can take up to 2 consecutive semesters of leave of absence, and you are still part of the, you don't have to go, you don't have to be readmitted to the university. You can just come back after taking 1 or 2 semesters and enroll in classes. So there's no other further action that needs to be taken. But if you decide to take longer than the year, you have to go through the readmission process, which is just simply going through the registrar's office and indicating that you want to return to USD.
Thank you. And I know many of you have addressed how a lot is dependent on whether the county allows for the school to reopen. However, this question sort of addresses a different aspect. In what scenario does the campus come to a close? Will this be dependent on a county guidelines, or could it be based on a threshold for cases on campus?
Melissa? You're on mute.
The county will be highly connected to making that decision, and it will probably end up being a county order when it happens, if it were to happen, and hopefully it will not happen. But traditionally, the reason that a closure happens is because we see community spread in a way that we feel that the county and epidemiologists feel the best way to manage the community spread is to close certain areas. And so the county might tell us, based off our community spread at USD or in the surrounding area or in the county, that we need to roll back or move back to stricter guidance. And so then we would align with that. I do not see a situation where the university would make that decision to close without support of the county or the state.
Thank you for your responses. Another question from students is, will on-campus student jobs still exist, whether hiring new students or previous jobs that students held?
Yes, there will be federal work study opportunities for students, and there will be casual worker opportunities for students. To what degree and how many and in what locations, I don't have that level of detail.
Thank you. The next question is, what proportion of professors have opted to do remote only classes? Furthermore, what percentage of classes will be held in the hybrid model compared to fully remote?
Rick?
So I think the first part of my answer to that is to clarify opted. We didn't just walk up to faculty and say, so would you like to teach on campus or would you like to teach remotely? The working with HR, there was a process where there were different criteria by which a faculty member might be able to teach remotely if necessary. And so it was things like if they had an existing medical condition, or if they were in a high-risk group, or if they had significant other considerations that are all related to COVID. So it was not just a convenience factor. That said, the number depends based on the unit. I think that within engineering, it was something like 33% of the sections of classes are going to be entirely remote. I think in the college, maybe it was the high 30s or something like that. But it's roughly in that 30 to 40% overall. Of course, in certain areas, it might be low in 25%, and in other areas, it might be higher. So I can't address specifics. Looking at the engineering classes, because those are the ones that I know the best, the percentage of sections that are going to be offered in the hybrid mode is really close to the percentage of faculty that are going to be in hybrid mode. So it's going to be in that same, 30 to 40 ish percent, more or less.
And the
Dr.
numbers in
Green?
college the numbers in the college are pretty similar to engineering as well.
Thank you, everyone. In regards to the email that was sent by Dr. Harris, it was listed that campus members will have to submit themselves to COVID-19 testing. Students are wondering, will COVID-19 testing be free for them, or will they have to do it independently themselves?
I'm happy to answer that question. The testing is a recommendation, and that's based on availability of tests and what's recommended in relationship with your primary care provider. We are very fortunate that on campus, we have a county site that is free to students or anyone in the community. So there would not be a payment for that. Additionally, there are state opportunities that are free, and many counties across the nation have free testing sites. So, and we will work with individuals who need support for free testing, and it all is also covered by insurance. So if somebody has insurance with a family, or if you are on our student health insurance plan, that would be covered by a primary care provider.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, how many spaces will be designated for students that need to self-isolate?
I'm happy to answer that question. At this point, we're identifying approximately 40, just a little bit over 40. And that would be for students who may need to self-isolate or quarantine, depending upon their living environment. Some people in their living environment may be able to quarantine in the space that they are currently in, and some may need to move, for example, if they are in a shared bathroom space. So if you think about the residence halls with community bathrooms, those individuals who may need to quarantine, we would likely need to move. So, but we have just over 40 spaces currently identified.
Thank you, Dr. Halter. I'm going to pivot to another question that has received high demand. Will roommates or neighborhoods be changed? So this may be addressed to Dr. LaCroix. For example, will roommate placements and neighborhoods for the vistas be changed to match the rooming requirements for the fall?
That's a great question. So we are assessing those types of opportunities based on the student's response by August 17th.
July 17.
Thank you. Every day just ends in day, and like this, we don't leave our apartments. But and yes, July 17th. Thank you, Vice President Vazquez. We'll be able to assess how we can keep students together if they are reassigned to spaces on campus where instead of 4 people per apartment, it's 2, or they're reassigned to Loma Palisades or Pacific Ridge with moving 4 students as a group. That will depend on the individual student's response to the questionnaire. I do know from our previous leases with Pacific Ridge and Loma Palisades is that they're not like in a hallway in those facilities. So keeping a neighborhood together is a question that I don't feel like I'm able to answer at this point. But I do know that we're working closely with students on an individual basis to see what might be plausible. And I don't know if that specifically means that a neighborhood would be in the same building in Pacific Ridge, but maybe that might be a neighborhood might be in the same property, like instead of splitting them between the 2 or 3 if we go in that direction. But I think it's also helpful. Like I really appreciate ASG and Vice President Vazquez organizing this. This news just came to us like with it less than 48 hours ago. Less than 36, I think. So we're doing our best to kind of piece this together. And this is the first pandemic I've ever worked in, and I've worked in housing for 20 years. So we're doing this together. Like we're living history. And I think that the work that we do to kind of assume the best in each other, both students, families, and administrators and faculty, as well as living to the code that ASG has put forward, the pledge, on and off campus. We're not in gatherings of 50 at the beach, and like this is how we keep our campus open. This is how we keep our city and our county safe. So, and I'm not saying that as a commercial. I'm saying that like we want to welcome students to the residence halls. We want to welcome students to our off-campus properties. It's really different, and we're trying to be as transparent as possible with the information that we have. So
Thank you for that, Luke. I would like to just add that what I heard in your message also is, and it's something we've talked about all 4 months now, is that it's really important to give each other grace. You know, this is a really difficult time. And so just think about that as we're working together to create a new way and a new path.
Thank you. We're going to try to squeeze in one more question. This will be our last question, and it is, will we be kicked off if we go remote mid-semester of campus and dorms?
I don't think that the two are hand in glove, so to speak. So it really depends on the conditions. You know, it depends on the conditions for going remote. So I'd like to say that it's not definitive either way.
And I would
And
say,
Melissa, do you want?
yeah, I'll jump in, is we want to keep students on campus. And that needs to be a priority for you all to know while we are balancing safety.
Right.
And creating the safest environment we can. We can't take away all risk. We're mitigating risk, and we're doing this together. And if we can keep people on campus, we want to keep people on campus. And you know, our USD is not the same without students on the campus. You create the campus. And so if we can have you on campus, we want you on campus. We will create another amazing USD remotely if we have to go all remotely, but the hybrid model is an ideal so that we can pivot as quickly as possible, and we will do everything we can to keep you on campus unless we have an order from the county that says we have to shut down. And if we have an order, and hopefully we will not, we, just like we did last year, we did everything we could to keep those students who did not have a place to go on campus or in an environment off campus. And so we can make that commitment to you as we will continue to work with you if that were to happen. But we will not just say you are kicked off campus. So please know we do this together, we do it in community, and we take care of one another.
Thank you. Before I move on to my closing remarks, do any of the panelists have anything they would like to say?
I'd like to just again thank the ASG for hosting this evening's conversation. I want the students who are listening to us and giving us the time and attention that you did this evening to say thank you to you, to let you know how much we really want to see you on campus. I put the campus on my back screen tonight because that's our home together, and we will be together again soon. And I want you to know that the community of leadership that's with us this evening are working so hard. We have hundreds of faculty, staff, and students working together to bring you back to campus as soon as possible and as safe as possible. And in the meantime, take care of yourself, be well, make healthy choices, and we'll see you in about a month or so.
Justin, would you like to?
Yes. First of all, thank you to everyone in this Zoom call and on the YouTube chat. For all the participants that have submitted questions, I want you all to know that we have tallied all the questions and we have them on our files. So any and all unanswered questions, we will be addressing them in some future fashion, whether it be an email or an FAQ page. The status of that is TBD, but we want you to know that your questions were not ignored. We just have limited time. So thank you everyone for contributing and checking in.
Thank you all again for participating. And I would just like to say to my fellow Toreros, no matter how much pain, uncertainty, and anguish we go through, we will get through this and we will come out stronger than ever. Everyone, please stay safe and wear your masks. Have a good night.